Hi, this is Hiki with the Lost Samba podcast, and today we're not going to talk about an artist, a songwriter, nothing like that. Today we're going to talk about Brazil, the song. In Portuguese or in Brazil, it's called Aquarela do Brasil, and it is probably the Brazilian song that was most famous around the world. Probably more famous than its anthem, which is quite famous for who watches football. It always plays before the games of the Brazilian team. But this song, it reached that kind of level. Its origins and its path towards notoriety, international notoriety, is very curious, and therefore it's worthwhile having a podcast just about it. It was written during the 40s, during the war, and in a day that it was raining a lot, and Ari Barroso, the composer, stayed at home and decided to write a song, and it came out. Brazil at the time was under a dictatorship, the dictatorship of Getúlio Vargas, who is the longest serving leader of Brazil. Perhaps there's an exception of the king. Brazil had kings. At the time of the war, at that period, it was a very interesting one, even in relation to Getúlio Vargas, because before that, Brazil had been very pro-Nazi. There was a lot of... he himself saw himself more or less as a fascist, as a Nazi, not officially, but in practice. The dictatorship was pretty harsh. There was a lot of racism, and a lot of sympathy for Germany in the higher ranks of the government. This song, it is a song, it's called a Samba Exaltação. It gave birth to the Samba Exaltação, which means the exaltation samba. It's very nationalistic. It speaks about Brazil, how marvelous Brazil is, and how great its nights are, its people are, everything in Brazil is great, and what a great country, which serves a dictatorship very well. Now, here comes the first quirk of this song. The composer, he wasn't at all a fascist. He didn't have this in mind when he wrote this. It actually speaks about Brazil from the perspective of the more humble people. It speaks a lot about black people, and it was almost censored. Getúlio and his censors didn't like it, but it was a very good song. It served its purpose of exalting the country, and the censorship let it go. Although it spoke about the black people, it remembers the slavery. It doesn't reflect those people's culture. It was recorded in an operatic voice with an orchestra, which has, although the rhythm is a bit African, but it really has nothing to do. It doesn't come from those people. It talks about them only almost in a patronizing way, but it touches the subject, and Getúlio Vargas didn't like it. The time of its release, right, when it was released, it marked a turning point of the Getúlio Vargas perspective on the war, right? England resisted, the Americans came in, and Germany started to lose. In Russia, it started to get hard. So the war started to turn, right? And Getúlio Vargas saw that. He didn't have anything. He sold food to the Germans, and the Germans, despite this, they sank some Brazilian ships, and the Americans appeared. They needed Brazil as a base to transport things to Africa, where there was a war happening. They wanted Brazil on their side, and they promised Brazil a lot of investment, a lot of money, which made Getúlio Vargas change his mind and side with the Allies. Brazil even sent troops to Italy. They liberated Italy together with the Americans. They were engaged in some really difficult battles. Bringing Brazil into the war right, or into the Allied side, it brought a policy from the American government which was called the policy of good neighborhood or of good neighbors. And they promoted Brazilian culture in the States. Unfortunately, I wasn't alive at that time, they couldn't promote Lost Samba. But they promoted Brazilian culture big time in the United States in three ways, right? The first way was very disastrous, right? So they called the biggest director Hollywood had, the biggest film director Hollywood had at the time, Orson Welles, to make a film about Brazil. So the film was going to be a documentary, but it ended up really bad. It went well over budget. Orson Welles couldn't perform some commitments that he had with the studios. All the money went there. The equipment broke down. And everything that could go wrong went wrong. And to topple the disaster, the main character of this documentary was a Brazilian hero, was a fisherman who had come in a typical raft, jangada, from Ceará, that's close to the equator, to Rio de Janeiro, that's in the tropics, so it's a long, long, long journey. And this was in all the newspapers. He became a national hero. He was received by Getúlio Vargas. And one day they went to film this guy in Rio, you know, very picturesque with all these views. He in his raft, and the raft turned over, and he died. So that was like he was badly seen in the United States by the studios, and in Brazil it was a complete disaster, and that sedimented his reputation of being a difficult director, being crazy, and everything. This really spoiled Orson Welles' career, and that marked him forever. The film was never released. It was found in a vault in the 1990s or the 1980s, but it spent decades hidden. It was really a complete disaster. The second tactic of the United States, cultural tactic of the United States, ended much better. And this was Carmen Miranda.
My friends, I extend felicitations to our South American relations. May we never leave.
Was taken from Brazil, was discovered in Brazil, taken to the States, and she became like the Madonna of those days. She was one of the best paid actresses of all the studios. Every film she did was a certainty of success. Everybody wanted a piece of her. She was huge, something that no Brazilian artist has ever managed to do abroad, to be that popular abroad. She sold millions of records, made the studios rich. Carmen Miranda was a phenomenon. And finally, Walt Disney did a film about Brazil, an animated film, and its main character was a parrot called Joe Carioca. In Brazil it's called Zé Carioca, which was quite popular in the 60s and the 70s. Everybody read the Walt Disney things. And in this film, he is with Donald Duck, and they dance through the streets of Rio. And the song that plays while he's dancing with Donald Duck in Rio is Aquarela do Brasil, or Brazil the Song, and that made it famous. It was recorded by Frank Sinatra, by several big artists, and it sold like 1 million copies. It was really, and not only in America, all over the world in the post-war, it was a huge success. And even later on in the 80s, Monty Python does a film called Brazil the Song, and you hear the song. was really a Django Reinhardt also recorded it as jazz, but a lot of jazz musicians recorded it too. Everybody can, when they hear this music, they relate it to Brazil in a very, doesn't sound like the song, but it's like the thing is Brasil, da 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 da. Everybody has heard this. In Brazil, the fact that it was so successful abroad made people reject it. Brazil has what they call in Brazil the complex of street dog, right? That everything that's successful from Brazil abroad is rejected at home. Like Carmen Miranda was rejected big time at home. This song was rejected, not only because of this, also because of its fascist past, and because of the style it was recorded in Brazil, very, very operatic. Later on, artists discovered it. Everybody recorded, from Caetano Veloso to Elis Regina. It became very popular decades later, and it's in one of the best records ever recorded of Bossa Nova, with Caetano Veloso, Gilberto Gil, João Gilberto, who is their idol, and Maria Bethânia, João Gilberto being the godfather of Bossa Nova, and they recorded it in probably the best recording this song has ever received. So today I'm going to play it. It's not João Gilberto, it's not Caetano Veloso, it's not Elis Regina, it's not Frank Sinatra, but I hope you like my version. Brasil, meu Brasil brasileiro, mulato insoneiro, vou cantar-te nos meus versos, meu Brasil samba que dá para o mundo se admira, o Brasil do meu amor, terra de Nosso Senhor. Abre a cortina do passado, tira a mãe preta do cerrado, bota o rei Congo no congado, canta de novo trovadora, merencória, luz da lua, toda a canção do seu amor. Quero ver essa dona caminhando pelos salões, arrastando o seu vestido rendado. Brasil, esse coqueiro que dá coco, aonde amarro a minha rede, nas noites claras de luar. Foi essas fontes murmurantes onde eu mato a minha sede, onde a lua vem brincar. Quero ver essa dona caminhando pelos salões, arrastando o seu vestido rendado. Brasil, terra boa e gostosa, da morena cestosa, com olhar indiferente. Meu Brasil samba que dá para o mundo se admira, o Brasil do meu amor, terra de Nosso Senhor. quirk of this song, it's not actually a quirk of this song, but it relates to a previous podcast that I did about Ciaciata, in that where Ciaciata lived, Samba was born in Rio, a place called Praça 11. Well, it was originally a place where the freed enslaved people used to live, but it also became a place that received immigration from Europe, refugees from Europe, so a lot of Spanish and Italian refugees ended up there, mainly anarchists, also lots of Jewish people ended up there, fleeing anti-Semitism. And because of this mixture of, freed and enslaved people, European anarchists, Jews, and more cultural cariocas, it became really a effervescent cultural center where everything happened, and the Brazilian culture flourished, and a lot of interesting sambas came out, and a lot of interesting intellectuals and artists. And this was completely against what Getúlio Vargas and the fascists believed in. So they simply knocked the whole neighborhood down for an avenue to pass called Avenida Presidente Vargas, obviously. So this place doesn't exist anymore in Rio. There are some places close to it that still resemble what it must have been, like Pedra do Sal, Lapa. But the Praça 11, that was the birth of Carioca culture, doesn't exist anymore. The only thing that exists is a little stone remembering that it was there, and there's a huge avenue over what was Rio de Janeiro's cultural center. So I hope you like this podcast, and I hope to see you again next week. Bye.